People really underestimate the connection, even psychologically, but financially, like incentives, alignment, everything that ownership actually does, right? It's enabling people to actually own things they buy virtually.
Welcome back to Inside Moves. We're here at the Slam headquarters in New York City. Really excited for today's episode. Going to get us a little bit outside the box of the things that we've talked about so far. I'm sitting here with Nick Vale, a successful entrepreneur, video game creator, co-founder of Rumble League Studios and the RumbleCon League. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Pumped to be here.
So we're going to do something different here than we've done in the past. Going to start it off with like a little icebreaker. Just going to name two things. You pick your preference, or if I say favorite thing, you just got to do your favorite thing.
Cool.
Console or PC?
That's tough. Console is where, like, for me, that's where the glory days started. So I got to go console. Nowadays, PC, but console's the roots.
I respect that. Android or iOS?
iOS, hands down.
iOS, okay.
Yeah.
Favorite basketball team?
I'm a Phoenix Suns guy through and through. I'm Arizona born and raised. And, like, just growing up, like, the glory days of, like, Steve Nash and, like, I just, like, Suns are at heart for me.
Ethereum or Solana?
ETH. All day long.
No doubt. Yeah. That's a loaded question. Cool. Last one for you. Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto?
That might be the most difficult one. I think it's weird, right? Because like Call of Duty shaped, I feel like Call of Duty shaped like a demographic of gamers into GTA in ways.
Yeah. Until
GTA became like what it is. Today it's GTA. I think like looking back, it's Call of Duty for sure.
I'm a Call of Duty guy. I do love like the open I don't know what you even call it, like role player game.
The role playing servers, and
that's fun. But for me, it's like the low latency, fast action is just, it blows my mind. So I'm a Call of Duty guy through and through. All right, so far we've had Slam, RTG features, and front office sports on Inside Moves here. The RumbleCon League gets us outside of that realm a ton. I can talk a bit about why this investment made sense to JDS, et cetera, but I'm not going to try and explain RumbleCon League to our viewers. I'm going to leave it up to you. Can you give us like a rundown of what you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. So really what we are, like in its simplest core baked down, is a 3v3 fast-paced, like action-packed mobile basketball game. Like that's it at its core. There's 100 layers deeper, from digital asset ownership all the way down to ways to earn, to ways to own teams, competitive ranked leagues, et cetera. But on its core, it's like a new age NBA Jam on steroids. It's like how I pitch it to people.
Even before we get into like the crypto digital asset side of things, let's jump into like the gaming. You are how old now?
27.
27. At what age was this that you were the top indie game in the Xbox store? Is that correct?
Yeah. So really so for context, I grew up around my father's computer company. So like I was always from a young age, like building computers, he does point of sale systems, so like cash registers. It's how I really got into it. And naturally, like when you're building hardware and tinkering with like computers and then like low level programming languages at a young age, like when you're young, you care about video games, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that like forayed into specifically Call of Duty. Like I started doing like hacked Xbox lobbies, if you remember way back in the day, right? Like 10th prestige lobbies and Call of Duty and these kind of things. I started doing that deeply, like modded controllers, early days, like tinkering with hardware.
How old were you? This is important. This is crazy to me. Like you were this young.
13, 14.
Yeah,
like
it's nuts.
Pretty much around then. And again, like I would go to my dad's company and like he had everything set up. Like they were building hardware. So they'd have like stations to solder hardware, and like I would just learn things, like bug on employees of his. And so we, like when you're hacking video games and like hacking things in computing in general, which back then it was like true hacking, nowadays it's a little different.
Yeah.
But you naturally like go through this, you're kind of reverse engineering things, right? So eventually you're like, okay, I know how to take apart these things. I know how to hack these things. Now I want to build them, right? Mm. So that kind of led me to, at the time, this is like pre-game engine days, right? I was like, okay, I'm hacking video games. I want to make them, right? Like you sort of are in a way, and you're seeing all the code behind the scenes. Like, now how do I make these myself? And Microsoft had a program, and like I kind of owe it my whole start to that, like Microsoft had this Xbox Indie Games program. It's very reminiscent, which we can get into in a bit, of Web3 today, which was basically a peer-reviewed marketplace. So like you as an independent developer could publish a game, and other developers that had the license as well, which you had to pay for, and it was a subscription, could review your game. If you hit certain milestones, certain criterias, and a certain amount of peer reviews accepted, you could publish on the store. And they took a percentage of it, could set the price, various tranches. It was like very early indie days. So that was really like where I like started to cement things. And it was like the real only way to empower like developers back then for games.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just crazy. You're an entrepreneur. You build video games at such a young age. These are like really intimidating things. I guess, a lot of it, you're attributing to being around the right people, having the right opportunities, but it's just wild to me that like a 13-year-old kid, like I'm 28 years old and I wouldn't know where to start, To me, it makes sense why you have a success like that at an early age. And then you have the confidence in your early 20s to go out and become, a serial entrepreneur. You've started multiple things by now, huh?
Yeah. I think it's just like, I don't know. I was always that weird kid inside playing with tech. Like I would literally blow off hanging out with friends to play video games with my online friends, right? So like fast forward to today, all of that growing up has like led to understanding like internet culture, I guess. But I don't know. Like I always kind of felt an urgency to like create a community, do something, build something. I think my parents, like at a young age, like always empowered that. Like they weren't like, hey, go do that, or like you need to be focused on this. It was kind of like, what do you want to do, right? And how can we help you? Like I would go build computers with my dad on the weekend. He'd take me to the store to buy new parts so I could like do something else. And he didn't even understand half of it, right? But he was like, okay, you need a new graphics card to be able to push this. Like, let's go get that, right? So I think they just kind of let me fly in that sense. And they understood like, we might not get this, but there's something here and you should go run for it.
It's important to point out that this game that you're building now at Rumble League Studios, the RumbleCon League, it has a marriage with crypto. And I'm curious how that all went down for you. Like when did you start getting interested in decentralized networks, blockchains?
Yep.
And when did the light bulb come on for you that, wow, like gaming and blockchains go well together?
It's interesting. Like looking back, obviously crypto was in a much different place, but my brother had gone super deep down like early Bitcoin rabbit hole. And I'm talking like white paper 2013 days. And for context, my brother's he's the guy talking about conspiracy theories and like pushing the boundaries of like what's real or what's not. So like he's one of those guys coming to you preaching Bitcoin in 2013. You're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Right. But at the time, he was kind of trying to push this early sports betting concept. I had obviously built some successful indie games. And we're like, hey, like, what can we do here with this new technology? Like, there's no middleman. It's peer-to-peer. And I recall he was at college at the time and I was still in high school. And we hung up the phone and we're like, let's buy $8,000 or $10,000 in Bitcoin total. This was at $1, like way back 2013, 2014. We just didn't do it because at the time it wasn't like people look at those times and they're like, oh, I would have bought immediately. But this is like this is peer to peer.
Yeah.
Like this was send anonymous person money, hope they send your Bitcoin. Right. And so anyway, I say that to say like we're working on this early sports betting concept, which is funny how it leads me today with sports. For obvious reasons, it didn't really work out. Regulations were weird. And we just went down the rabbit hole from like caring more about it from an investment standpoint, like a thesis, the future of like how you could interact with people without middlemen and transact. And then I guess fast forward a little bit in 2017, I learned about NFTs through CryptoKitties. And that was kind of my worlds colliding. Like I had seen through our indie games, the one in particular, Total Miner Forge, we were the #1 best-selling of all time on Xbox. It was the first real port of Minecraft to Xbox. And we had seen like Microsoft shut down the indie games marketplace. So this is like 2013, I think, or 12. I forget the exact year, but they shut it down to focus on the arcade system. And the arcade system was kind of publisher oriented. There was like a $50,000, $60,000 startup cost. It was completely opposite what indie game devs were used to. And So I had seen like, this is before Discord existed, or like we had an internet forum, right? Like for Total Miner, but it wasn't like your community's with you like today.
Right.
Like when the publisher shuts you down, like your users are gone, right? Like we had millions of users gone overnight effectively, right? Or churned off. And so when I really learned about like digital asset ownership in 2017, to me, that was like the light bulb of like, this is how you actually own your community, how you actually can interact with your community, how a publisher can't just like control what you do or say, right?
You know, anybody watching this podcast might have seen us talk to Slam or Front Office Sports, and that all kind of fits into a box. And they may wonder, you know, what's JDS doing investing in a crypto-based video game, right? It's a fair question.
As wild as it sounds.
Yeah. So like going back to, you know, Joe Sandberg is, he's our chairman, lead investor. He got all this going, JDS. He's been interested in decentralized networks for a long time. He's been a successful investor, and going back to music, right? Like LimeWire, things like that, right? Napster. Always been an interest for him. When I met him, it was, 2018, 19. We shared a crypto interest, and one of his questions to us at JDS was like, how is all of this going to disrupt our world in sports, media, entertainment? In our search for seeing something in the blockchain world colliding with our world, we found Hashleets, which was, NBA Top Shot before Top Shot. We got to meet Michael Anderson, Vance Spencer, who was building Hashleets, a game that was built on the blockchain that used the likeness
OG.
of the athletes. Yeah, exactly. It was very cool. Long story short, they felt that Hashleets was ahead of its time. And they showed us all the things that needed to be built in order to bring a full-fledged consumer application to life. And those were things like, Chainlink, the graph, and then they pitched us on Framework Ventures. That's a whole nother story in itself. But that was kind of our intro into crypto. And where we learned a ton. Framework went off and did the investing for us, essentially, in a lot of ways. And Joe Sandberg was instrumental in guiding a lot of the things that they were doing. But then at JDS, we were kind of like, okay, we're learning a lot. Let's look out for things that take a blockchain and start to connect to our world. RomoCon League being a perfect example of a basketball game that utilizes a blockchain. You're somebody who's in this world building this stuff. How do you explain to somebody why a blockchain is important inside of a video game? Like why does this make it better?
A lot of people like today, we're an early project that was obviously a gaming project from the start. I think a lot of crypto NFT projects have suddenly like evolved into gaming, which is great. Like the use case is very clear for gaming, I think. But I say that to say like I think people try to like put a blanket statement across like crypto, blockchain, gaming, and how it fits into gaming. I think it's it's vastly different across genres, across like specific use cases, like even use cases within an ecosystem. So like for instance, with us, we have multiple layers, right? Like we have a casual layer, which is no different than like a free to play model. There's gradual ways to onboard them to actually owning their assets, abilities to actually earn like kickbacks of real world rewards, right? Collect different assets, et cetera, which is like a basic use case, right? But then when you kind of push up to this top level, like in the RumbleKong League, it's kind of like our NBA analogy in Ranked League. This is like high stakes competitive play. It's like the ability to actually wager crypto, actual ability to like use your assets that you own, that you've trained, that have like stats that you actually utilize. And I think like I say ranked because our club's ecosystem is a great example of that. Like we sold these NFTs that are club representation within our game. These people actually own them. So like, if you start a clan in Call of Duty, you don't really feel like you need to go search for a brand partner for your Call of Duty team necessarily, unless you're an esports organization, right? And I think people really underestimate the connection, even psychologically, but financially, like incentives, alignment, everything that ownership actually does, right? So like these clubs have literally gone out and created their own brands within the brand of RKL, right? Because they truly own them. Like Paul George is signed to a club, right? Like I've heard there's Nike designers designing for some of these clubs. Others of them are just like have raised their own funding rounds, even through like community raises, or they've issued their own NFTs to like crowdsource a movement together for their beliefs within the RKL. So I just think you get these like very interesting network effects. both from an ownership standpoint, but then also from like an asset standpoint of bridging in like interoperability with other assets in the game as well. So I think there's a lot of layers to it, but in the basic sense, it's like it's enabling people to actually own things they buy virtually.
For somebody who is a bit unfamiliar, can you kind of just give us a map here of like what are the things I can actually own? You know, you talk about the club, the Kongs. There's a play to earn element, maybe a token. Like how does that all? You know, can you lay that out for us?
There's a few different elements, right? So there's the Kongs, which are like the Genesis collection. This was, in a way, it was like a Kickstarter to feel the idea. It was like aligning people who care about what we're trying to do, which is like sports culture, hoops on the blockchain, right? Owning your real assets, playing in this ranked league. It was like reigniting this category we think doesn't exist in mobile gaming today, which we can get into a little bit. Then there's your rookies collection. This is like your lower tier collection, cheaper entry, smaller ways to earn. You can still own them. You can do interesting things. It's just a smaller barrier to entry.
Yep.
And you have your clubs, which is like, there's only 50 in existence. These are your NBA teams. This is your highest earn component, highest ability to wager. But I guess like to your question specifically, blockchains really like, to me, they're a network where people can interact without trust, without even knowing who's on the other end, right? Without even needing to interact with anyone on the other end, fueled by incentive alignment, like at its core. Like I think a lot of people try to overcomplicate it because there's a lot of ways you can, but it's no different than taking like, you know, if you've ever been a part of like some sort of internet community, like let's enable them to interact in a way that they don't even need to have lawyers involved. Right. But they can. Like, I think an interesting thing I always explain to people unfamiliar with blockchains is like how like a multi-sig wallet works. It's like people find it fascinating that, you know, when we founded RumbleKong Leagues, there's 4 of us that had never met in person, but we could interact with to the tune of raising millions of dollars with literally not even needing a legal contract in place, right? Because we can trustlessly interact with, you know, with each other on these chains.
I see it's also solving like a lot of things that Web 2 gaming are already trying to do, right? Like if you go play Fortnite, they're giving you a token. It's all kind of black box. Like you don't really know what the economics of that are. You don't really, you know, you're trusting them. But there's like abstract ways, I guess, of delivering that value to the user. And then a blockchain presents a platform for this to all happen transparently, openly, and really let the user participate in the upside of a game.
Yeah, and even more than that is like enabling like a flourishing ecosystem. So like if you look at, there's only like a few Web 2 examples that do it well. There's a lot of Web 3 examples that even pre-product I think do it well, which is building like and enabling incentives for people to build tools complementary, right? Like we've seen in our community, like in fact, the most used marketplace to purchase Kongs is community created, right? And it's because the existing marketplaces don't support like the boost stats, which are just the player stats, right? Of each individual Kong. But this is like what fuels the future of gaming, in my opinion, is like enabling true user generated content on the level where they can quite literally have a side hustle or own their own business or have something connected, right? And you know, Fortnite's a great example because I think the UEFN mode is starting to hit on this, where people are building games within a game and you know, they're earning from it, but I can guarantee you that they're seeing 4 or 5% of the upside that Epic is seeing.
You hit a bit on the community. You talked earlier about how Paul George has a Kong. Community members are building things. You guys have been on a long journey. You know, the RumbleKongs existed before this bear market we went through, and now we're standing on the other side of it, hopefully, with a lot of the community intact, maybe stronger than ever. I'd love to hear you talk a bit about who's in the community and what that journey's been like.
Yeah, I think I'm a part of a lot of communities. I've been a part of a lot of communities over the years, and I think the most interesting thing, like from an unbiased perspective about RKL's community is like the sheer like breadth of talent. Like there is artists, musicians, 3D animators, like business executives, NBA athletes like Steph, like PG, right? NBA team owners or like large brand, you know, C-level execs. Like there's such this crazy mix where like a lot of communities are very centered on like, hey, we are like the IP project, or like we all care about X or Y, right? Whereas I think like RKL's more like we all are coming together for the love of like the culture of hoops in sports, but everyone comes from like a crazy different background or walk of life. And we've seen that. Like we've run community creation contests, and like the sheer like breadth is just insane. Like it's not like we see a lot of repetition in certain things. It's like, oh my God, this guy created a physical toy, and this person over here dropped a track that he produced. Like one of them produced with has produced for Lil Wayne, right?
Yeah.
And like it's just insane to me that these people can come together on one belief and like one agreement and one interest, right?
If you're familiar with crypto games, there have been a handful of them. If you got a crypto game out during the last bear market, or during the last bull market, it was probably rushed, right? And something that I've noticed, and it's no secret, a lot of these communities, it's not about building a great game. It's the token that's attached to it in this new Wild West that can pump. And when the token pumps, people love the game. And then when, we have rate cuts and the economy's not doing great and there isn't, gains to be had, they kind of disappear. RumbleCon League is different. What would you attribute that to? I go in the Discord daily and there's still people in there. And it's been like, it's not just because crypto is doing well right now.
Yeah. It's
been like this for over a year, years since you guys started, where they're talking to each other every day and they're trying to put out a good game. Like, what would you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think it's kind of just like the foundation we set early on. Like we launched in the PFP craze of 2021. And I think we could have pushed out like partnerships people have never seen before with brands and names people have never seen. And they would be like what I consider like nonsense marketing, right? Which is like, we're partnering with X.
Yeah.
And you never see anything come of it, right? Like look back, I always urge people to look back to 2021 on like these celebrities that had Bored Apes as PFPs and like all these partnerships, and like where is it, right? Where has it materialized? Where has the value actually been created? And it's like, well, it was created over the span of 3 days in a token pump, right?
Yeah.
And there's a game to that as well. But like the game we've always played and set up from the start is like, we're going to build a real product that eventually will onboard like true people who care about what we're doing. And we're not going to lean into something before something real's there. And now that we're getting close to like actual product and actual product launch towards the summer here, it's like, okay, now we can start to turn on that machine of let's lean into the Web3 side a lot more, the incentives, the craziness that comes with it, because we've built a real product over the past 2.5 years. Whereas a lot of these games, to your point, are like, the same shell of a game that was something else, and now let's slap a token on it because people care, and it might matter for a month or 6 months.
Yeah.
But past that, you're gonna have a hard time figuring out what your actual business model is.
Yeah. What have been some of your favorite moments with the RumbleCon community? Got to shout them out a bit. I know it's been, like I said, years now, and so some come right to my head. It's been a cool run.
Yeah, definitely. No, there's a crazy amount. I think obviously like you can't, if you're in the RKL community, about the Steph beanie moment when Steph wore the beanie out. And I think that one's so cool because while Steph, and his fun penny jar investors of ours, they didn't, like, no one knew, right? Like, of course we sent him merch like we do with, NBA athletes and that we're connected to. But he just wore it out, right? And like, this is a guy who can get paid $1 million to wear socks, right? And he just genuinely cares. And I was with him in December at a penny jar event, and like as soon as I like pointed at him and we talked about it, he was like, he knew exactly when he wear it and where, and he was in the community, like in the Discord, seeing the reactions, right? So I think that's just a legendary one. Of course, like our first alpha test of the latest version of the game was an exciting one for me because it's something we've been working on and we've seen ups and downs in the product even through the past years. And I think it was like the first opening to the community of like, oh wow, like I really see where this is going, and things really clicked. So I just like personally attribute that one. But I think the community would say the beanie moment is the
beanie moment was
like
great.
They sold out. People were reselling them on eBay.
Yeah, I didn't have one at the time, and I was so angry. I was like, I need to get one of these beanies, and then I couldn't get one. I got my hoodie though, my crew neck. I got to get a good shot.
The OG merch right there.
Yeah, it's a good one. So you talked a bit about the community, and to me, it's like the foundation. And you want to be careful if and when a token comes into play because of the dangers that we kind of talked about earlier, right? Where you attract other people that that might have different motives other than just putting out a good game. How do you think about that? What lessons have you learned from previous token pump and dumps? And what do you think a good timing for something like that is?
I guess first it comes down to product. It's like, is your product ready to actually get in the hands of people? Like in a lot of ways, tokens should be looked at as user acquisition. Like it should be looked at as dumping gas on the fire. Like you should have a little bit of a flame and you should be able to ignite it with incentives, be it through user acquisition, be it through like empowering builders in your ecosystem already, attracting new ones. And I think, we were talking a bit about this before we started here, but like you need to be ready for this investor archetype. Like, and we have it today as Kong holders. Like there are people who are older. They're not necessarily going to play a mobile game. Maybe they're not even a gamer, but they really like what we're doing and they see the future of it. And so they're speculating to some degree by holding Kongs, right? And you have to be aware of that. I think any like project or founder who pretends that doesn't exist is just like, they're not aware of their actual user base, right? And so, yeah, like we very much view token as dumping gas on what we know is a solid product first. And that's why we spent so long like building game product instead of just pushing out a token that probably in 2021 could have had a crazy valuation and frankly would have been down only ever since. And community would have been more angry than us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think like as we look towards the next months, like crypto's obviously made a really exciting comeback. And, I don't know if people say it's too early to say it's a bull or I don't know. And because, broader macro is still in a very interesting place. But, personally, I think gaming is the narrative of this cycle now. And as we continue over the next year, two, I mean, we'll see, right? We'll see how the market shakes out. Who knows what can happen? And, an FTX like situation comes out of the blue and who knows, right? But I do think like gaming is going to be at the forefront of like actually bringing retail and consumers into crypto, like hands down.
So how many years has it been since the original Genesis drop of the Kongs?
So Genesis drop was July 2021. So we're coming up on 3 in July, obviously. So like two and a little.
And it's really hard to build a game. I think, that's something you knew at a young age, but I think something that Kong holders and other crypto people that elevated their understanding of games didn't really appreciate until they're invested in this new game that's supposed to come out.
Yep.
Can you talk a bit about that? Like, what does it really take to build a game and how has the roadmap evolved over those 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like a lot of people don't realize that I haven't built games. Like, first of all, games is a hits business, right? Like people see like new Call of Duty's coming out or like this Fortnite update's out. It's like what you're not seeing is the 42 titles that they spent $500 million on that they threw away, right? Because their early tests in Canada or the Philippines or wherever they're doing user testing weren't successful, right? Like it's a hits business at the end of the day. And to that, like great games take, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Some games you don't even see a trailer for 6 years, right? Until it comes out. And when you do see those companies start to even tease that game coming out, they're 4 years into development. And again, $200 million in, right? So it's definitely not an easy route. And like, I've known this building indie games long. And I think in many ways that's helped me with our RKL journey because we know when to like kind of let off the gas a little bit or push forward, or when to change things, when to, slightly pivot concepts in the game, et cetera. And the only thing that Web3 frankly does, if we only look at it from a game developer's perspective, is make it even more difficult, right?
Yeah,
because you have,
no doubt.
I always say it's kind of like having a public company before you even know what the hell the company is, right?
Yeah.
Like you're a startup at the end of the day and you're a startup in an even more difficult industry, which is a hits business. And you have a community that wants to play it yesterday, right? So
one of the smartest things I ever heard a crypto person say was, don't launch your token until you find product market fit.
Yeah.
Because you'll never know what product market fit is once the token is out in the wild.
Yeah.
And that was like illuminating for me, while I was trying to mine Axie, or whatever it was. But I was like, it's a really good point. It's how do you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle.
Yeah, and like a lot of people, like the meme, right, is that token is the product market fit in the crypto space, which for many projects it is. But like when you're building a game, people think like, oh, dump out a token on holders or on this or on that. It's like, you're launching an economy. You're launching a full digital economy that in many ways is like a little mini country, right? And so you have to have all these pieces in place or nearby or ready. And you also have to have your team and your development team ready to like iterate, pivot, try things, fail, find the successes, lean into them more, even more so than like a traditional tech company, because you're dealing with a live economy.
I've played test versions of the Romacon League on my phone. I was super impressed. I'm really excited to see what's to come. Where are we at? How are you feeling about things, and what are the target dates where we can kind of expect some more?
Yeah, I think we're probably at the most exciting point we've ever been from a product perspective, because we've gone through many different iterations of the game. Like, it was initially kind of AI controlled, more sim based, doesn't really hit on mobile, doesn't really work. It's also really hard to find a balance of too much player input on mobile, like heavy player input. Sports games don't quite stick with how we are kind of pushing into the market we are. But yeah, so we're at the best point probably ever. We've done an alpha and an open beta test to date of the latest version of the game on iOS and Android with the player input approach, with the broader like city metaverse that we've built out, which went really well. Like, our last beta test, we saw an average of an hour and 45-minute engagement times. And like, this is before there's a meta game. This is before there's even retention mechanisms. Like, the only form, quote unquote, of retention we had was a leaderboard, which was nothing, right? So it's looking really good. We just pushed V1 of our metagame internally, which went really well so far. There's a lot of balancing to be had. There's a lot of changes to be made, but we're on track right now for a June, July soft launch of the game, which is exciting. And that's, again, first version with like a proper reward loop, in-game items, your NFTs integrated. Your ranked play and your ranked league aren't there yet, but it's really the first like complete version of core game.
Cool. So you will be able to play against other users, not just AI at this point.
Right. And not only that, but you'll be able to actually walk up in the interactive hub world or City Athlos and challenge players. Initially, you'll be playing against their Kongs that AI control, but it'll very quickly turn PvP where you're actually live time playing each other.
And this is fully, built on top of Web3 Rails. We'll be able to, tell what the boosts are, who the Kong owners are, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. So all of your in-game assets effectively, for the most part, are ownable, tradable, burnable, really whatever you want to do with them. So all, wallets are integrated. We have custodial and non-custodial in the background. So obviously, like, traditional players can be onboarded to actually own those items. But yeah, like, all on Web3 Rails, our blockchain is Avalanche, and kind of the broader network we're building out, which we haven't talked too much about yet. We'll kind of start to come out and come to fruition. But really, like, RKL is this proof of concept to a broader sports vision that we're building in gaming and in entertainment.
Yeah. So can you talk more about that? I know we're really excited to get this first version of the game, but after that, things like clubs, things like exploring Athlos, what does, you go as deep as far as you want, but like, what are the big picture items that, you guys have been dreaming up?
Yeah, really, like, the vision since day one. I think a lot of the deep community's known this. Again, we haven't pushed too much about it publicly yet, but we're going to be over the next kind of 1 to 2 months, is this broader network, which I don't know when this will come out, but I assume after we've announced it, but which we're calling Fame, right? Which is like this future of sports culture on chain, right? Which is like, we have so many areas we can explore into, but it all starts with nailing basketball and gaming. Athlos, the city you mentioned, which is this fully mobile ready interactive world, multiplayer enabled. There's quests in it. It's this full kind of like ecosystem. There's different UGC elements we're going to eventually be bringing in as well. But we kind of view this as becoming this like sports hub with interconnected titles, not just basketball, but other sports like soccer, boxing, various others, right? But again, that all comes with nailing, basketball first, but really building out this broader network of like the home of athletes, of brands, of gamers, of fans, bettors, right? Like, there's this intersection that they all kind of like tend to, get along around, which is gaming, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we've seen this with the NBA athletes we've talked to, with even the like investors or gamers we've talked to. Like, it just seems like they all culminate around this one thing, which is like interacting together in a gaming environment.
So nailing basketball, I would say, part of that has to be solving clubs and making clubs awesome. This first version of the game, more casual players can come in. Where is clubs on your roadmap, and how do you envision that coming together?
Yeah, clubs are a tricky one, right? In the sense that there's so much we can do, but it also has to be clear and make sense from a consumer standpoint as well for it to work well. Excuse me. First of all, clubs. So there will be clubs in the game initially, but it will be much more like if you've played 2K where you kind of pick your team, it will be much more like brand building, right? So there'll be like official club members that are set by the actual club owners, and we've built out a full web portal where they can do all of that. And then there will be casual players that can come in and set a club, rep the jersey, kind of spread the brand, right? It's kind of like having a blue check mark in game. Clubs are a little further towards the end of the year. We'll see where we net out, but August, September is when we're starting to get into that ranked play, like first versions of ranked leagues. But again, it's really like it's high stakes competitions at the end of the day. And like it will start with those tournaments with incentives, going head to head and like building media around it where we're live streaming these events. We're pulling them out of just the game. We're enabling people, in a perfect world, there's a lot of steps to get there, but to even like bet, speculate, and get involved in that club's ecosystem. So I think there's a lot we can do with it. But again, like it really starts, okay, let's nail fun, engaging core game that's fun and interactive that people even want to take part in, watch, etc. And then layer in the club's ecosystem, which to us is very much like gaming guilds meets esports meets NBA teams.
Yeah, I can't wait for that part. I know, like growing up, I remember being at the lunch table and my friends all have their phones in front of them. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? They're playing Clash of Clans, and like that social aspect where like you're doing something with your friends. It's one of the reasons why Call of Duty is so fun, right? Where you can get into a search and destroy lobby with 6 of your buddies and go compete together. I think that'll be, instrumental in the RKL really taking off and this community becoming a lot, 10x, 100x, et cetera,
Yeah, and I think the clubs layer, like, we don't like to overcomplicate it in the sense that I think people who haven't it might sound weird if you've never been in game development, but like listening to your users is the key. Like we have a crazy passionate community. We'll be onboarding gamers into the actual game as casual play gets out there. And quite frankly, like clubs will, I think, start to define itself even more so. We've thought about it very deeply in many ways, but I think the route to take will really start to shape when we see those initial users coming in. And a lot of people sleep on that, but I think that's the number one thing game studios are doing wrong today is they're building for, different KPIs and not like the users that will be around 5-10 years from now.
Yeah. Well, watch out for Notorious KONG. I heard they got a good club coming together. I know.
I've got the merch.
I know Astro Kongs is going to be tough to beat too. Well, it's NFT NYC out there. I know you're a busy guy this week. A lot of people want your attention. You probably got some places to show face. Don't want to keep you much longer. Is there anything you want to shout out to the Kong holders and any message you want to get across before we go?
No, I think just as always, like, big shout out to the community. We just came from the Battle for NYC event, which we won, which was a huge battle between like the top communities in Web3. And I've been telling them, and like there's hoopers and then there's hoopers. Yeah. So we took home the W. So a big shout out to that. And
good job, Kongs. We cannot go down as the basketball community in crypto.
I told them, I said we're pivoting to cricket.
Lose that tournament.
If we lose the only hoops project loses.
Well, good job. I'm sure your recruiting skills came into play there a bit.
Yeah, like I said great leaders delegate. So that's why I sat out of the tournament so we could win.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here in NYC.
Absolutely. No, appreciate it as always.